regular board meeting of Rothschild Sanitary District of October 18th, 2017 to order and ask for a roll call.
Okay, Kathleen?
Here.
Borstein?
Yes, ma'am.
Miggs? Here. Scylla? Here. Kelly?
Here, and with that, I'm going to adjourn to closed session. Okay. I'm going to call the regular board meeting of October 18th, 2017 back to session. We had a closed session. We have nothing to report at this time. I'm going to ask everyone to please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm going to, I'm sorry. I'm not reporting anything from closed session, so I'm going to ask for an approval agenda. But before I do that, I'm going to continue agenda number 12, the consideration of approving the Ross Valley Sanitary District Financial Policies book at the financial meeting of Monday. Both subcommittee members, Tom and I, had a lot of questions on it, so we're continuing that at our subcommittee meeting, so therefore we're taking it off. I'm also going to move number 14, consideration of authorizing the general manager to execute an agreement for consulting services with Patrick Clark Consulting not to exceed $60,000 to after 6. We can put it right before the after the public time and before the committee's report hours. Is that approved?
Yeah, but also, what item do you usually march for landing?
Yes.
And that is what? Let's
March
move
for
that.
landing
Is 10.
is 10.
Let's move that right up after 10.
I'm fine with that. Is that fine?
No, it's actually 11.
11.
Number,
Empty jams.
It's not Larkspur Creek side.
Yeah.
oh, it's 11. It's
Move 11. Okay, so 14 is going to come after 6, and number 11 is coming after that. Can I have a motion to approve that agenda?
I move.
Second?
Second.
All approved? Aye. Okay, and at this time, I'm going to ask for an open time for the public to raise issues on the agenda or for future agenda items. Members of the public may address the board on issues that are within the sanitary district's jurisdiction, but the board cannot hold any conversation at this time. Seeing none, I'm going to move.
Maybe for a future agenda, and it's a comment, just it's important in apropos of what's happening up north of us. I just want to make a statement of what is happening so that the district knows.
Okay.
Just 30-second statement.
You're not public though, Michael. Andrea will allow it.
Greg and Steve are reaching out to our neighbors in Napa and Sonoma to see if anybody needs any mutual assistance in terms of maybe some of our expertise in getting a pump getting going and using our vac truck. Any equipment which we might have sitting in our yard right now and is not being used every day. And I just wanted to let us know that we're doing everything we can to help out.
Okay, with that, I'm going to open agenda number 14, consideration of authorizing the general manager to execute an agreement for consulting services with Patrick Clark Consulting for a not to exceed amount of $60,000. Typically, this was agenda item number 14. So let's open that up, and I'd ask for a staff report. Right?
Okay, do a brief introduction, and we have Patrick Clark here as well to answer any questions from the board. So, as the board knows, in our annual business plan, we've identified a goal of early preparation and anticipation of the end of the current AFSCME labor agreement. That labor agreement was a 3-year agreement. By the time it was fully executed, we were actually about, I think, plus or minus 9 months into it. So about a third of that agreement's term was retro at the time of approval by the parties. So it's come up on us, maybe quicker than we expected. But that agreement ends in June of 2018. So we're anticipating beginning labor negotiations early in the calendar year, approximately the January-February timeline. So in anticipation of that, we're putting the resources and team in place to support the negotiations. Just as a reminder, in the last go-round, that the folks supporting management in the district included Patrick Clark as lead labor negotiator, We had assistance from Tim Davis from a legal perspective, and with RGS at the time as well as part of that team. So what we're doing this evening, or what's before the board this evening, is to consider approving a new contract with Patrick Clark Consulting, same approximate scope of services. The amount that's been set but not to exceed $60,000 was based, we think, conservatively on the costs for the previous negotiation round, which, as you all recall, was a pretty lengthy and somewhat complicated one. We at the moment don't anticipate this new round to have the same scope of issues on the table. That will remain to be seen, but we do feel that the $60,000 is a reasonable, hopefully conservative, not to exceed cap. You have the consulting contract from Patrick Clark that's been reviewed by legal counsel, and staff's recommendation is to approve the contract and engage Patrick Clark's services for the upcoming negotiations. And with that, I'll hand it back to the board.
Questions?
Do we hire the council, or do you hire? Does this?
We direct contracted with Burke Williams, which is Tim Davis's firm, separate from Patrick Clark.
Did Greg tell you that you were going to come to reorganize the district?
We're going back to the old way.
So,
Thanks, Tom.
okay, good. They were very neat.
You guys coming back and just being.
Yeah.
I have one more question. Okay, what you say?
Go right ahead, please.
I heard that Piedmont, and I wish you would see if you can find out, that the city of Piedmont, the PERS and SSE's earnings, and I'll find out some more about this, the district isn't solely responsible for making up the difference, that it's shared with the employees. I may be misinterpreting that, but I talked to somebody there. Could you ask them?
Well, I think I can answer that question. I mean, there are two ways. One is that, the employee makes a contribution to the pension directly. But in the event that there is a failure to pay the employee's pension, as has happened 4 times so far this year, the pension can be reduced, commensurate with the funding level that is available. So there were a number of them I've been kind of following so far this year, where the 402 were done at the last board meeting. In some cases, the pension was reduced to 0 based off of the funding that was available. So, there had heretofore been like this assumption until Stockton and Vallejo that the pension itself was sacrosanct, that it would be up to the employer and maybe a pool of employers, or maybe the state of California, or whatever. I think until it happened, there wasn't, I think, a realization that, if you drill down, if there is an inability to pay or a refusal to pay on the part of the employer, then the pension is what gets reduced. So that's, I'm not aware of any other manner, unless you have some sort of cost-sharing agreement.
I think it's a cost-sharing agreement.
There may be something like that, yeah. It's very unusual. Normally, you would characterize an employee's liability as a % of payroll each month, as you do here. But I have seen them where there were various triggers that as pension liability went up, the employee would contribute more. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to find out some more about it.
Sure. I'll ask as well.
Last city of
City of Piedmont?
yes. That'd be
Michael?
Congratulations on last time. That was a big lift.
I can't believe we're here.
I remember that day, like 15 minutes before the board meeting.
Oh, yeah.
You guys were signing papers over here. Changing and signing.
Yeah, Block must have that out. Seriously. No, I think parts of it were genuinely dramatic.
Yeah, we went over this in the HR subcommittee, so I think I have my questions answered.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have to look back. I think I was elected in 2009, and that was one thing I asked from this reorganization. never thought it would happen, but it did, so.
You got your wish?
Greg, and, so, yeah, and I think things are smoothing out now more. It's just, it's a good thing. It was overdue, way overdue.
Yeah, and I just have to say, especially with regard to the cap, unless you do have something really surprising, it's very unusual for a district to go as long as we did last time. It was really, you know, a function of the scale of the reorganization and then the particular representative we're dealing with. So I'll be very surprised if it takes anything like the amount of time that we did last time.
And so the 60,000 was.
That seems, yeah,
We will not exceed the not to exceed.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I actually was surprised if we spent half that.
Well, we need attorneys.
Could you write that down, please? That goes in the minutes. That goes in the minutes. With that, I'm going to call for a
Pam, you asked about
Attorneys, will we need attorneys for anything?
You never
Does it
know.
matter?
Yeah, we may.
I mean, you know, there's an issue right now that is kind of come to the fore. I've had a couple of employers that have been audited recently by the IRS, and things that, you know, are very commonplace. I can say, you know, vacation cash out, you know, accumulation of compensating time off and then subsequent cash out thereof. It's a constructive receipt. It's not a new thing. Constructive receipt has been around forever, but all of a sudden, the IRS, you know, was just in Yuba City. They've been making their rounds, and they come in and say, you've got a constructive receipt issue. So without, again, looking at the MOU with fresh eyes, I can't tell you that there won't be, but you know, certainly the reorganization definitely made it more acutely needed, but we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, anyone else?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
I move we authorize the general manager to execute an agreement for consultant services, contract company consulting for a budget exceed of $60,000.
Second.
I have a second?
Yes, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All
Aye.
opposed? Okay, it passes. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to meet you, Patrick.
See you in December, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll be in touch.
Okay, we are moving number 11 item, consideration of approving task order number 3 of the master service agreement with Kennedy Jenks, draft remediation work plan refinement. And may I have a report?
Okay, so I'll give a brief intro to this, and we have Todd Miller here from Kennedy Jenks to answer any questions. So this is probably a timely action in terms of just a quick update to the board overall as well on the status of things, but just to recap, we set a series of pretty specific goals in the past year to move forward the remediation of the Larkspur Landing site. Those included the development of a technical work plan for the actual remediation work and submittal of that plan to EPA, ultimately for their approval, which we would need before moving forward. In parallel with that, we also set a target of completing the CEQA review for the remediation project. We've largely accomplished both of those, except for the actual goal of the approval from EPA, and that's where we've kind of hit some snags in the past roughly 2 months. As a reminder to the board, on I guess a slightly more positive note, the CEQA process is done. We have completed that. The related federal agency, with the exception of EPA, related to things like the wetlands delineation and so forth, those have all also been completed. And we have a fairly clear path with the city of Larkspur as far as local permits related to the remediation project. So in the big scheme of the set of activities needed to support the remediation, there has been substantial progress. We did, but where we've hit this is we did submit a draft work plan after several in-person meetings and workshops with EPA staff. We felt it was, obviously the intent was for it to be a responsive and complete application. EPA took a few months to review that. When they did come back with their review comments, they were, I think it's fair to say, unexpectedly exhaustive or extensive is probably a better word. And so there are a number of relatively tough technical issues, tough in the sense of just getting to the same page with EPA, that we need to get resolution on. None of this changes. I want to be, clear with the board. When you go back to the proposed approach to remediation, the scope of work, the order of magnitude of the activities involved, none of that has changed. This isn't a question of we don't agree with the remediation approach. We're down to some very narrow technical issues related to the sampling requirements, testing requirements, some differences of view in terms of how you take the EPA-approved work plan and incorporate it into actual bid documents. And again, we're not building a pipeline. This is a little bit unusual. It's a brownfield remediation. And their staff have one view, and we're sort of like, that's not how public bidding works. We can't. So we're working through a number of those issues, but it has simply been more difficult and time-consuming than we anticipated. So Kennedy Jenks is current task order. They've completed all of the work that the district asked them to do. The budgets are expended. The CEQA work is also done. Those budgets are expended. And we see the need clearly for some remaining, really just labor time. We're not talking about like going out and doing drilling or sampling or anything. This is really just staff time for the technical team to remain engaged with EPA in San Francisco and have the time and resources to go and sit and get through these remaining technical issues with the EPA staff. The goal being, we feel like we're very close to the approved work plan. This is basically to try and help us push that over the finish line. I did not attach on purpose the complete documents to the staff report. I thought it would be good for the board just to get a sense of the magnitude of those documents. So you have the first couple of pages, table of contents, for example, of the remediation work plan, and then you do have the full, I'll call it the unabridged version of the EPA comments, and as you can see, they run to 9, 10, 11, 12, essentially 13 pages, 26 different issues. Now, a lot of those issues are very closely related to each other. They've broken them out, but they boil down, I think, to essentially 3 or 4 core issues. Yeah. So that is what this new task order would be providing. It's basically providing time for KJ staff time to see if we can push this over the finish line and get a approved work plan with EPA. And with that, I'll head back to the board and answer, and Todd and I hopefully can answer any questions.
All right, go ahead.
Are we going to have to do more boring? I'm looking at the first possible need for refined sampling. Is it possible we have to do some more boring?
Our approach with EPA is no. We've done, so let me step back, if you will, and do brief history and kind of walk you through the process of how we got here very quickly. When this whole process started, we met with the EPA and we sat down and said, there are a lot of unknowns. Here's a plan to answer those unknowns, to get the data to answer the unknowns. EPA and Kennedy Jenks and Ross Valley kind of negotiated what that scope would look like, and we came to an agreement. We wrote the work plan after coming to the agreement of what the scope should be, handed it to EPA. They refined it. We had another meeting to discuss those refinements. They approved the work plan. We went out and implemented the work plan just as it was approved. We then accumulated all that data, summarized it, put it in this draft application, and now there are questions from a technical perspective that EPA is asking where we don't believe there's a data gap. And what we need to do is sit down with them and talk through. So out of all their 26 comments, there are 3 or 4 basic comments. One of their issues is, if you remember this, the contamination is what we're referring to kind of as pancake or sandwich, if you will. There's a top layer that's by analytical definition clean. Then we have this middle layer of imported soil that has some contaminant in it. And then at the base of the excavation, you have this construction debris, the concrete that was ground out and used as backfill. Those are the three basic layers we're dealing with EPA. Their first concern is that their statement in there is that we did not collect samples of the concrete crushed material for analysis. That's absolutely incorrect. We collected, we're reading the comments going, somebody just didn't get it, which tells me either they didn't understand the work plan they approved, they didn't understand the write-up. The write-up is relatively straightforward and clear, and has a lot of illustrations and a lot of summaries. So that's one issue, is they don't believe that construction material at the base is properly characterized. The second layer is they're questioning whether or not there's enough data in that middle layer, if that's been well characterized. I think it's important to note that they're not questioning the size of the excavation that we came up with or the volume. All of their questions really come down to one basic decision, which is when you excavate this material, where does it go? What landfill does it go to? And that's what they're really trying to resolve, is it's not digging it up and putting it in a landfill is the right or wrong decision. That's what's proposed, that's what they accept. The size of it is acceptable to them. We've defined it by all this analytical. The real question is, where does this material go? So we need to sit down with them and explain to them, the level of detail to which we've characterized, and really find out what it is they don't understand about the characterization of the material, so we can then address it. For the deeper construction debris, that bottom layer, if it needs to be recharacterized, it will be recharacterized at the time that it's excavated. There's no other way. We've collected samples about as dense as we can from that material without actually digging it up and laying it out and sampling it. So if EPA is going to require additional sampling, it would come at the time of remediation. So that would be built into the bid documents.
So we're not planning to do that now?
No, our plan right now is to sit down with EPA, go through the issues, resolve all of the issues we can, and come away with what they'll consider a conditional approval, which is we approve your work plan, but you have to do a little bit of extra work here, here, and here at the time of remediation. Greg is correct. There is one of their comments is they need all of the bid documentation as part of the remediation plan. Our perspective is this is a public job. We can't prepare the bid documents until you approve the plan. So we're in a catch-22 here. The bid documents, as you well know, are, and I don't think EPA understands this, are the contractor's instructions on what to do. It's the contractor who gets to decide the means and the methods. And I think that's where EPA is concerned. They don't understand the means and the methods. Well, no one's going to tell the contractor exactly how to dig with what piece of equipment. Do you start from the north and go south? Do you start from the south? That's the contractor's decision at the time of bid. He makes those decisions. He runs the job the way he runs the job. The bid specifications are the performance criteria that he has to meet. Stormwater quality, air quality, protection of all of these things. Ensuring trucks don't leave the site dirty, ensuring it gets to the right landfill, all the paperwork. Those are the performance criteria. We could give the EPA the performance criteria in a very short, small document if that's what they want. But that wouldn't be the bid specs. But we can't prepare the bid specs until we get an approved plan. And so I don't think they fully understand the process. One of the other concerns that they have is that superficial layer. How are we going to manage it? And where are we going to put it? And the idea is the upper surface layer is clean. We need to haul it out of the way, stockpile it somewhere, and then reuse it. And they just need to understand better where that is. So we've worked with Greg to develop kind of a summary matrix of, out of all of these questions they have, what pocket, what category do they fit into? And now it's a matter of sitting down with EPA to try to understand from their opinion what additional information do they need to answer the question.
I think it'd be a good idea to give them the requirements of the contractor, not all the bid specifications, but that short booklet you said. I think that'd be a good thing to bring as part of the argument, and then how they're going to reach back, how they're going to use
Yeah,
I think that might be good.
yeah, and that's something we will offer up to them, if that's the type of information they want. Their comment specifically calls out, they expect all the construction documents as part of the bid package.
And that's where it gets, so there, and we may just be, you know, it may be just, you know, we coming up with different perspectives, but we don't, at the moment, it doesn't seem appropriate to us, the team, that you put together the entire construction bid package, give that then to EPA to review and approve, because first of all, it's going to be this whole new review, right, of like, okay, what about this, that, we don't know what they'll get into, and that's, and we don't, it really doesn't seem appropriate. We're looking at from the perspective of the work plan that you approved has set all of the appropriate guidelines, requirements, applicable restrictions, et cetera. Those will be appropriately incorporated into a set of specifications and drawings and so forth. But for us to do that ahead of time, give that to you is like this road that we don't know where it ends. You know, it doesn't, now you're reviewing a whole set of construction documents that aren't your purview. So it's sort of a practical matter on the one hand, but it's also, I think, just it's important that we don't go forward until we have some idea how that's going to work out with them. Just to clarify a couple things, so no, this topic goes far back. In October, roughly October to December of last year, we did what we call the site characterization. And the contractor, under Kenny Jake's direction, performed roughly 700 to 800 bores on that site. And then we took samples at multiple vertical locations from each of those 800 bores. So remember, there's a three-dimensional model of that site that is generated from those 800 borings and the vertical profiles that were generated. So we're not working from a lack of information here. There's a wealth of information to characterize that site. And the intent there was to have that characterization done ahead of time, delineate the excavation limits and what material goes to what landfill class ahead of time, and not try to do it while you're actually doing the excavation. That was the pre-characterization, right?
Yeah.
So what Todd was alluding to earlier was that if we come to, we simply can't get to a better solution, we may have to simply say, okay, elements of this area will still be removed in the same way, but when we get to this layer down here that we haven't been able to get to agreement with you on, so to speak, we may have to do essentially additional characterization at the time of excavation. That's not the end of the world, it's just not the preferred way to do it. We had a strategy in mind which they actually, I would say, implicitly supported when it was presented, because we didn't do those 800 bores without buy-in from EPA. Right. We submitted to them the characterization approach and how we were going to generate the information to support the work plan, and they said, that looks like a good approach, 800 borings, that's pretty conservative. We sure thought so. We thought at that point, how much is there left to, delineate and characterize? So that kind of just gives you a sense of, we've tried to narrow this down to what's these remaining questions, because it's not a matter of generating more field data, more sampling and characterization in the technical team's approach, or the technical team's opinion, I should say. So that's where we're at. Other questions?
I have a couple.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea on excavation, what we're dealing with to take out of there? Do you have any rough idea?
Volume-wise?
Volume, yeah.
I want to say that total volume is up around 18,000 or 20,000 cubic yards in place. The upper 2 feet, which represents about a third of that material, is being proposed to be reused. I think those are the numbers we're looking at. Again, those are rough numbers. We haven't gone through the detailed design and calculations yet.
I guess I'm imagining you put the stuff on a train, ship it out.
If there was a train there, yes. I'm actually doing that at another site right now where we're loading it onto rail cars. There is no rail there, so we have to load it on the truck.
Just smart parking garage coming there.
Yeah.
Smart.
You can, there's a bay, there's a water rail. So the other question I have on 25 section, they want a biotic habitat report. What is that?
That is, that's related to the wetlands that is near the excavation,
Okay.
I believe. So Yeah, so there's, as was defined in the secret documents, there is a wetlands near the facility that's not in the work area. So at the time that the work is done, you're going to need a biologist just to confirm that the habitat is not disturbed. There might be a restriction on time of year you can do the work, or
Yeah, I mean.
there could be some restrictions, but that will be on the contractor. That will be part of the contract that is
That's all I
left.
Yeah, you answered my question, thank you.
So do you have a next meeting date with them, or are we?
We don't.
We don't. We've been, actually, the caseworker provided us the comments, and then her supervisor has been on vacation. And he just got back a week or 2 weeks ago. And we now want to reach out and schedule that meeting. Just so the district realizes, it's not our intent to just go meet with them and fold up and walk away and go, okay, we can do whatever you want. If need be, we will elevate the issue above, supervisor up to the next level. Because the data we provided, we believe, is reasonable, and it's quite a bit of data. It's a relatively thorough characterization, and it warrants some very strong decisions.
Do you think having a board member there would be helpful? Or make it
Greg?
worse?
No, the short answer is
It's
no.
too
It wouldn't
technical.
add, just to
It's
bring
too
another
technical.
point, yeah, I think you might shift it's a very, the group is there, it's very knowledgeable, it's the right group. We just, EPA is not a monolithic organization. You have sort of people with different views, but they defer to other people. They have different roles. So we're trying to be sensitive about that, and but there are one or two key technical staff who, their opinion, their view, and decisions do carry a lot of weight, and we're trying to tread carefully and bring that group along. And we do, I think we have a good set of, in terms of technical resources, we have, you guys have, Keith has not been in front of this board for a while. Keith's last name.
Takata.
Thank you. Keith Takata, I think you've all met Keith maybe just once. Keith is also part of the team. He worked with the EPA for, his entire career, I think, and so we feel like we've got the right audience. It's just been difficult to get them to a decision point for a host of reasons. But
Are these the same people who approved the plan?
Yes.
same audience we've been talking to. Yeah.
And I hate to say, they were instrumental in helping create the plan. I mean,
Right.
When we went to them, we said, here are some ideas, what do you think? And they latched on and said, let's do this and this and this, and we thought it, massaged it, and went back to them with an idea, and they approved it. So, same individuals, yeah.
So it's a little surprising that they have other.
It's very surprising,
Okay.
yeah.
And the EPA still exists.
In California.
Yeah.
We're sure that little section is not gone.
Not yet, not yet.
On vacation, gone, maybe the same.
And do they not usually deal with public entities that are remediating? They truly don't understand our process, or a private entity's process would be different?
Well, you want to address that?
They do deal with public entities. Whether they understand the process or not, that I'm not sure, and it might be this particular individual that is not as schooled into the public process as others might be.
Maybe they don't understand construction.
But this is what they do, right? They tell entities how to do their remediation.
They can't tell you how to do it. They only tell you what the regulations say.
Right.
So, and that's another problem. Is the entire issue that we're facing really boils down to, where does this material go?
Right.
It's not, are you doing the right thing? Their concern is they want to make sure it's going to the right landfill. We think we've provided them enough data to demonstrate that we have a good understanding, good characterization of the process of the material, and then it should go to landfill A, not landfill B. They believe they need more information. So we need to get an understanding of what is that additional information, or do you actually have enough? So.
Well, I would gather there's only certain landfills the stuff can go to, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
What level?
Yeah, what level? So there's
I don't
class
understand.
one, well, there's class one hazardous waste
There's different
landfills.
classes, yeah.
And there's class, in California, it's called a class two landfill, which is a regulated waste. Most of this material should go to a class two. EPA's opinion is if you want all this to go away, haul it all to a class one landfill. Our opinion is, well, that's a lot of money. It's a public entity's right to manage their money appropriately for the community, for their interested parties. That's a lot of money to put out. Not only that, but you would be responsible for that hazardous waste forever. And it's not right to put that burden on you if it's not a warranted burden. And so to simply agree with them that it all goes to a class one landfill somewhere in Utah doesn't make sense. It's not a wise decision. There is some material out there, a very small limited amount that does need, it exceeds the TSCA, the Toxic Substance Control Act, the TSCA limits. It does need to go to a class one, but that's a very small volume.
And what's the purpose of sampling if we're gonna send it all to the highest level dump anyway?
Exactly. And we're not talking the difference between 5 and 10. Most of this material has PCB concentrations less than 1, the TSCA limit is 50. So there's a clear distinction that, the characterization is indicating something other than what EPA is wanting to push forward.
Okay. Are you seeking a motion?
I am. I'm seeking a motion.
All right,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, we got you right
I
here.
move that we approve task order number 3 in the amount of $40,000 for refinement and resubmittal of the draft remediation work plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
I approve if you promise not to roll over.
I've got too much stake in the game to roll over at this point. No,
Okay.
that's,
All right.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm going to go to number 7, and I don't think we should take very long, Jim. So, number 7, committee's report standing up. So the standing finance committee, Tom, will you be kind enough?
Yeah, the finance committee was up with the president yet, and we reviewed the interim financial statements. We didn't find anything wrong. We didn't notice the attorney general's.
We didn't, Lieutenant
The
Governor.
Lieutenant Governor.
But we did notice that there were a lot of payments for laptops. We did
Yeah, it was
notice
one of
that.
our big expenses. and
60,000 or something
Yeah.
like that. That was a
Good month.
We reviewed the agenda item knowing which Mr. Gibbs is going to talk about how to sell bonds that's coming up. We had a long discussion on that. We also reviewed consideration of approving the district financial policies, and we had a lot of comments, so we postponed that from the agenda. We have asked them. We took a look at the Rutland Capital Program. It's really a great report. And it lists all the capital projects that we have going. We took a look at the legal services. They're up this month, but they're within our budget for this year. But there was a big increase for a number of reasons. And then we looked at the lateral program report. This is a new report that we're getting, and it's really quite good. It was only for a month, so it couldn't show a lot, but we're going to get it quarterly. And then evidently we sold some surplus vehicles.
And did fairly well.
Did fairly well.
$17,000. 17,371.
Yeah.
Okay. Standing Human Resources Committee, Marin?
we reviewed the agenda item of hiring Patrick Clark and asked questions about that. We reviewed the monthly HR report and decided that the monthly HR report is now going to become, because the monthly HR report is now going to become quarterly, that the HR subcommittee does not need to meet more than quarterly to review that, although we'll be available to be helpful if Greg wants us to meet more frequently. But we simply had a light agenda this month and then began to question our utility. We want to be there if Greg needs us. We don't need to be looking over things just to have a meeting, so.
You think we should go into detail about the Patrick Clark thing? Oh, wait a minute.
We just
already
did it.
that.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's what I would say about that. I believe it has to be brought before the board to reduce the number of committee meetings, or no?
Correct. So that
We
is
can
a
do that.
decision we'll bring back.
For next
So
meeting.
that if we want to shift formally to a quarterly, we will do that at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Central Marin Sanitation Agency, Mike, would you do that, please?
You got your notes out?
I do.
Okay.
Talk about that.
Oh, yeah, the Listec Biosolids reuse presentation. We began to be worried over there, where are we going to take our biosolids? Because it's becoming more and more difficult. We're not always sure where in a few years who's going to take our biosolids, the end result of the treatment. And so there's a place out in Fairfield called Listec Biosolids. And it's actually really cool. They actually collect the biosolids from us, turned it into a sludge, and then they actually put it back into the ground as fertilizer for farmers out there. Some question, I didn't exactly get it, that can you call what you grow organic if it came from our biosolids? And I think he said no, that the organic stuff would not be certified out there. But the nice thing about it is that we are sending stuff over there right now, and we are in a revenue sharing agreement with them. And he had his daughter come and present us with a check. It's a little check, but it's the first of probably many over the years that we'll be dealing with them. The other thing, actually, number 11 over there was the Marin County Adult Offender Work Program, which was actually very cool. I don't know that we could utilize it, but they are, CMSA is certainly going to try to do it, where if you have nonviolent offenders, I think it's first offenders, who are in prison, they can actually come out and if we wanted to do something like this, you actually tell them what you want. If Felicia needed an accountant to help with a thing for a few months, you could request somebody, a CPA who's currently sitting in jail and serving nobody, to come in and assist in what we're doing. It doesn't cost us anything.
Only local jails, or we go to the Philippines? How far do we go?
I think it's a diversion program, right? I think people
Yes.
are,
It's instead of sitting.
It's generally for DUIs and things
Right,
like that.
and it's not people who go back to prison at nighttime. They
No.
are serving their time in the community.
I believe that's correct, yes.
And they can continue their jobs.
I think it's very
Good jobs.
commonly used.
But it might be worthwhile looking
Marin
at it.
Municipal does it.
For office work, not field work, correct?
No, it's field work. It's more field work than anything else, actually.
I mean, when
I
you
mean,
think about it, there's fire camp, there are like 3,800 prisoners fighting
Yeah.
fires right now, so.
But I mean, they could be clearing debris, or help, be hauling stuff that you guys pull out. Anyway, it is doable, but we agreed that we would try and utilize that at CMSA. They did a draft sea level rise assessment, and that was pretty interesting. They're very different than us, because we cover a great, much larger area than they do. But basically, the CMSA facilities are not in any particular danger of being flooded or underwater at any time in the near future. But Anderson Drive, parts of Sir Francis Drake, and other roads that give us access to the facility in the next 20 to 30 years will certainly probably have a difficulty if you believe in sea level rise. That's a good
And
thing.
it doesn't get on their plant site, but all around their plant site is
Anderson
a
Drive.
foot deep
is-
in water. So I think that they're going to get a lot more flow into the plant.
Where we have our warehouse. But that's many years from now. We do have some time to figure that out. But
You're sure of that?
To get our canoes ready.
Then we're going to be selling power back to PG&E onto the grid, hopefully starting about next March. And we had MC, Bring Clean Energy, through the PG. But the holdup here is that we are transmitting through the PG&E network, and then MCE gets it. We got an agreement from MCE about how it'll all work, and to us who don't really know much about power purchase agreements, but Mary Beth Bushy, that's what she does. And she brought up a whole lot of questions about the agreement and the stuff that was in it, and it got postponed for now because
She was a PUC administrator.
yeah, so we couldn't answer those questions. That was about that.
Okay. Thank you very much, the ad hoc committee for CMSA Joint Powers Agreement. We're moving along on revising the Joint Powers Agreement. One of the things we looked at is why does CMSA exist? You know, we define that. The purpose of that, I think I have that right here somewhere. The purpose of CMSA is to plan, acquire, construct, maintain, and operate facilities for the collection, treatment, reclamation, and disposal of wastewater, and to capture and utilize the renewable resources derived from the wastewater treatment process, including but not limited to biogas, recycled water, and biosolids. So we did that. We talked about bonds being used for capital improvement and operating funds. We talked about the equivalent dwelling units, which we seem to spend an awful lot of time on, but agree that we should have a common definition. We haven't exactly nailed it, the last details of it. We also decided we would put in the whereas at the beginning of the Joint Powers Agreement, whereas we intend to share more services and consolidate services in the future. We didn't say the word consolidate. There was one concern about were we dedicated to consolidating our different agencies with CMSA and with each other. And what we agreed is that in the recitals, we would agree that we are at this time looking to share services and share whatever we can, and then we'll take the next step at some time in the future. So I think that was about it. We have some big ones next month. The next month is the governing board, so that should be interesting and challenging. You know, I think with this board's approval, I might want to ask the mayor of Larkspur to make sure they're prepared to have an opinion about that, because I spoke to him recently about this issue of governing, and he said, yeah, we had a whole meeting about that, and I think we all kind of figured there's no reason for Larkspur to be involved anymore. And I looked at the meeting, and I looked at the meeting, and they didn't talk about that at all. They spent about 8 seconds on it, and it was like, move on. I think that really we need, I can tell you that I spoke to Hilmer, and he had somewhat the same feeling, but I think we'd ask, if you allow me, I'd like to just put a quick note into Karen and say, this agenda's coming up, but I'd like the Larkspur board to have an opinion, because it's challenging. And then there's somebody sitting right there, and they're like, well, we don't really know. And, you know, I think we need to have an opinion.
I'm fine with it.
I'd very much like you to bring it to the...
So that's that.
And I mean, if they do suddenly have an opinion, we would want to,
I think the opinion is that they feel there's no really point anymore. I think they agree with common sense. I really do. Okay, that moving on, I'd like to go to the consent calendar. Matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine, will be enacted with one motion unless somebody wishes to pull an agenda item off the consent calendar. Anybody from the board or the board wish to do that? Having heard none, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion.
Is that you, Mike?
Yes, we move the consent calendar.
And a second?
second.
Mary, second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It passes. Thank you. Let's move on to number 9, discussion and direction on the use of competitive or negotiated underwriting services for the issuance of the fiscal year 17-18 bonds, and we do have Jim Gibbs here, but can I start with you, Greg?
Sure, I'll do a quick introduction on this. And so this the item before the board is to provide direction on this decision. And I want to emphasize up front, this isn't like a trick question. There's not a really wrong or right answer. This is one that, either solution works, and we just need to pick one. So as the staff report summarizes, there's two basic ways that public agencies typically secure the underwriting services for a bond issuance. And I think everyone's pretty familiar, but at the risk of oversimplifying, what the underwriter is doing is they are acting as an intermediary between the district who is selling the bonds and the market, the bond market, the individual, the party that are going to buy the bonds. And the underwriter, the service they provide to us is certainty. They commit to purchasing, in essence, the bonds, expecting to then be able to turn around very quickly these days and sell those same bonds on the bond market in exchange or in compensation for taking on that risk, because they have now bought the bonds from the district and they need to hope that they can quickly move them on the market. They charge a fixed fee for that service. So when you look at the overall cost of issuance, so to speak, for the district, you have, you look at how these can shake out. You have an upfront fee for underwriting services that is ultimately a fixed fee, and then you have the results of their then selling those bonds on the market, which is in terms of the resulting interest rate that the bonds actually are sold at, which becomes obviously impacts the long-term cost of the capital. The traditional sort of summary has been you can either negotiate with one underwriter ahead of time, sign an agreement, that underwriter then goes to the market when you're ready and sells the bonds, or you can put the information out there, pick a business day, and then you have essentially a competitive bid for the underwriting services themselves, and everything then transpires essentially that same market day. An underwriter gets, secures those services on a competitive basis, and then sells the bonds. And as Jim can comment on, and I think we may allude to in some of the information, that then has some inherent risk for the underwriter in terms of that quick turnaround and moving it onto the market that same day. So Ross Valley has done both a negotiated underwriting approach, and we've done a competitive underwriting. And that's summarized in the report, the 2013 bonds and the 2014 bonds. The 2013 bonds were done with we had negotiated and selected an underwriter ahead of time, Southwest Securities. Those of you who are here may vaguely remember that the representative was actually here for one of the board meetings. In 2014, we, at the board's direction, elected to have a competitive underwriting selection. We, based on some pretty extensive discussions with the bond team and input from the financial advisor, and also, again, at the finance committee meeting, the staff recommendation, I think, I would put it that way, is to use what we're calling, you could call it, I'll describe it roughly as a modified negotiated approach, where step one will be to put out a request for proposals to as many as 10 or 11 qualified underwriting firms. Select one of those firms on a competitive basis, based on the criteria, and then with that selected firm, negotiate an agreement and have them then take the bonds to market when we're ready. So it's a kind of a two-step approach there. And we think that in a sense gets us sort of the best of both worlds. The intent there is that you get a very competitive fee for the underwriting service up front, and then you get the benefit of that underwriter having time to optimize the structure and composition of the bond issuance within the first, right up in the last 2 or 3 days before the bond sale, so that when it actually goes to market, you've got the optimal mix of maturities and interest rates to make that move. So that's the decision for the board. Whichever direction you guys go, the bond team will compile the documents and the sale process accordingly. And with that, I will hand it back to the board. And I know Tom and Jim and others have good information offered on this. So,
I feel Greg did a great job. I feel like you two.
Well, what-
If
Know
I
much
could,
about
I listened to you the other day, give your opinion, and I value your opinion very much. If you could say what you thought.
Well, here's the situation. Jim was very firm, as, with the data, and come up with a conclusion that I think is supported most of the time, not all the time.
You like competitive, though.
I love competitive.
I know.
But and I like competitive for a couple of reasons. I think it protects the board, that everything is done in the public, we don't bids about the lowest price. In the current, Jim will explain the current market, his findings, but what we've done, if we go to this kind of modified negotiated, when Southwest Securities was hired, we didn't get a fee bid from them right off the bat. They just got hired and then they sold the bonds, and here's our fee and here's the interest rate. And in this case, we're going to take bids from the underwriter to fix his fee. And then Sperry Capital's job is to hover close to them over their shoulders, and he's our question, and make sure what's going to happen is, and I'll explain more, but these bonds, there's a lot of cash out there, there's not too many of these bonds, they're going to be oversubscribed. And so you can now electronically see all the bids they get on their bonds. And they're going to use the fact that they're the sole provider to market these bonds. And the whole point is, just one other thing I wanted to say, the underwriter's fee is nominal compared to the interest cost of the bond.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking $40,000 for the underwriter, and on our big bond issue, there's about $15 million of interest. So the gain is the interest.
Of course it is.
And so by selecting an underwriter, we let him, the theory is, work on the interest rates. And see what happens. Generate interest on the bonds. Contact everybody early. Try and get as many as possible on all the bonds. And so, I think it's a plan, Given today's market, it could work.
The latest interest rate was MMWD at 3.85, is that correct? Jim Gibbs from Sperry Capital. The other issue is we now have an A rating. We're hoping to change our rating prior to the issuance of bonds, and we're hopeful with changes that we've made in organization, with our changes in our capital plan, and our expenditures, we could get a AA negative. Maybe even a AA. We don't say negative.
We don't say negative.
We don't say negative. Okay. With that, Jim, can you?
But I would like to make one comment. On our competitive sales, the interest rate, including everything, was 2.54%.
That's good.
Can you recall what we did on
I didn't know.
Mira?
Mira was,
It was low.
no, I can't recall. It might have been 2 cents.
2.7, I think.
But it was a shorter issue.
Okay.
Las Colinas and Sausalito, their TIC, true interest cost, including everything, Las Colinas is AAA rated, and it was 3.2 million for 25 years. And Sausalito's was 3.49. So I want you to beat that, Jim.
No problem. With regard to the Marin Municipal Water District, their sale was a little clouded by the fact that fresh ratings came out with what is called a negative outlook. In other words, they held on to their AA rating, but they're under scrutiny right now, and those ratings may drop. So that's a factor.
Okay.
Yes.
So.
Is that, I'm sorry, is that too because their rates went up or?
Because the rates didn't go up enough.
They didn't go up enough. Interesting, okay.
Yeah, and I will withhold comments about that. I'm also their financial advisor, so.
Sorry.
First of all, Director Kelly, I owe you an apology. I don't have an estimate of the rate today. I got totally absorbed in writing the request for proposal for underwriters, but I will get you.
All right. I asked for a ballpark of what he thought we might end up with.
Yeah.
And I'd like to apologize to you because I was deeply involved in making sure WD didn't raise the rates a lot, so.
So you cost us money.
A cost, that's exactly it.
Cost us?
Well, election of sensible taxpayers,
You
yes.
saved us and cost us.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Well, just a couple of quick comments. Greg's explanation of the distinctions between the two methods was better than what I could do. So if it was clear, I'm not going to say anything else more. With regard to sort of what's different about the market and the business today versus, a few years ago when, there really wasn't any question about the wisdom of doing competitive bid. What's happened is that the volume of business is down. There are fewer bonds available in the marketplace, but the investment bankers who basically pursue these assignments to do negotiated underwriting, they haven't quit. But they're basically slashing their wrists on their fees in order to win. And we get terrific results in this competitive bidding with regard to who gets to actually manage the negotiated sale. And so we gathered, there's tons of data out there, but we just picked out and put into a table in the report there 14 bond sales that are fairly recent. They're all highly rated. They're all roughly in the same size region that you guys issue. And there's just a very clear distinction, a difference between what the underwriters are gaining in compensation in the competitive bid process versus what they're having to accept as a much lower fee in negotiated. That's what this is all about. Tom is absolutely right. Compared to the interest cost of the issue, $300,000 or $400,000 isn't much money, but it is money. It matters to you, and so that's what's sort of driven our interest in the subject. And but the key question is, in the negotiated underwriting process, do we, the financial advisor, get as good or even a better result on the interest rates on bonds versus what's happening in the competitive bid? It's hard to do that. Every day is different. Every bond sale is different. But we found one example, at least, Tustin Unified School District, when within a month they sold bonds roughly the same amount, in one case competitive, in one case negotiated, and competently managed, and the rates on the negotiated were clearly better. So that gives us, we think this is the right way to go.
It's good.
So now, if you agree, it's on my back.
Questions, Mike?
No.
And you're saying the negotiated actually decides what day we would go to market?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We have
No,
dates.
we were talking about that it's very cool, that they'll have a screen up at the district and you can actually watch as the.
Right, so if we did it competitive, we're deciding what day we both, choose our underwriter and go to market.
Yeah, we do.
It all happens on, you
But
pick
if
the
we
day
did-
regardless.
but-
Yeah, we're gonna pick the day.
And the underwriter doesn't have anything to do with that?
Well, yeah, he can tell Jim, hey,
What he knows.
somebody got shot, but Jim Levin, and the market's going haywire, don't sell today, we're gonna postpone.
Which Jim would know anyway, probably.
Which what?
Which Jim would know anyway.
Well, he would know, he could look at the market.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a
I
lot
just
of-
wondered if there was if that was part of it, that having the underwriter contribute to the decision about what day.
Yeah, everything having to do with sort of the key factors in the sale are all in your control. When you get to sign off on everything.
That's kind of a difference too. Sometimes you don't get an FA when you're selling, and you got an underwriter. And the underwriter, you can buy insurance, and hopefully we'll be a AA minus, and the insurance gets you a AA. Well, the underwriter would say, buy it. and we have to pay for it, we would say, let's see if it saves us any money before we're going to buy it. You know, so we have an in-between to protect us. And I told Jim, I don't want the underwriter dictating all the terms and conditions. You know, we want to do the terms and conditions. That's are beneficial to us. So, I think this is going to be good. The proof in the pudding is, you know, I think the finance committee at least is going to be there with the screen and see all the bonds and how, if they're oversubscribed or not. And if they are oversubscribed, it means they've got $1 million offered and there's buyers that equate to about $4 million. And so what the underwriter has to do is lower the interest rate to try and eliminate buyers down to just one. And that's the plan. So so it's kind of interesting. We've negotiated the fee of the bond counsel. I mean, you know, we took competitive bids for that fee. We took competitive bids for Jim Gibbs' fee. We're going to take competitive bids for the underwriter's fee. And the underwriter is going to take competitive bids on each maturity. So we really have a lot of competition. And that's what
So you'll take that one little negotiated.
That was a good summary. I mean, I was looking through this and my eyes kept crossing, but that was a good summary.
Yeah. This is a boring business.
Another thing that the finance committee thought about was that what's going to happen is we're going to sell probably, we're going to sell $25 million worth of bonds. We're going to get premium bids, and we're going to wind up with $25 million of proceeds and sell maybe $24 million worth of bonds. Because they pay more for them than the price. But we might want to think about funding a share of the lateral program. You know, maybe a couple $100,000. Instead of dropping it to $24 million, go down to like 24 and a half, and fund maybe $500,000 of the lateral.
Yeah, we did, last time, in 2014, I think we raised about $1.5 million.
$1.5 million, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was because we had to pretty much to meet some of the cease and desist.
Well, we identified the need. I forget exactly, what conversations led up to it, but we knew we were ramping up our financial commitment to the grant program, and we knew that we wanted to be allowed to use an appropriate portion of the bond proceeds to do that, and so that was built into that bond issuance. And I think we've heard, a reminder overview from bond counsel that I think it's a 5%. The limit is up to 5% of the bond proceeds could be used for something like the lateral financial assistance.
Yeah, and we sold 30 million bonds. 5% is $1.5 million. That's the amount we put in.
Do we need a motion?
Do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
We went over this in finance, so I don't. So yeah, we call for motion.
Is it required?
Well, it really just says discussion and direction.
Oh.
Yeah, we
So
got
I'm not sure an action is required to direct.
I think we have to, and we gotta be on the board for it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, please.
All right, I move that we have a carefully managed negotiated sale for our next bond issuance per staff and consultant recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you at that bond sale.
Yeah.
Number 10, consideration of approving agreement for transfer of private sewer infrastructure from Lawrenceburg and Creek Homeowners Association to Rossville Sanitary District. We don't have anybody from Lawrenceburg here. Would you like to continue it, or do you want to?
No, I think we're prepared to, I mean, we've had very recent communications with them, and Andrew can speak to some of that from the legal counsel perspective, but to my understanding, the other party is aware of the action this evening and is expecting consideration of the item. So we were expecting someone here, but they're obviously not. So as a real quick overview, this is the sort of culmination of all the prior discussions on this going back, over a year, where the Larkspur Creekside HOA first approached the district, explained their concerns with continuing to own this several thousand feet of private sewer main, and whether or not RVSD would be interested in pursuing an agreement whereby the HOA constructs a new replacement sewer system to current RVSD standards at their sole cost, and with the appropriate checks and balances and verification in the process. When that new sewer system is up and running and verified, that it would then be transferred to public Ross Valley Sanitary District ownership and operation in the future. So the staff report summarizes all the past actions, supporting actions up to this point, and there has been no big changes. The board was presented with a term sheet previously and agreed that those were good basic terms to negotiate around. Legal counsel and counterpart from Larkspur Creekside then developed a complete draft agreement that has been through a few iterations. Larkspur Creekside had to work out some details of the process by which their membership approves the supporting actions, because they, as you know, have a lot of specific CCNRs that have to be considered in this. They have worked out those details. So with that, we felt that the time was right to go ahead and bring back the complete agreement for consideration for the Ross Valley Sanitary District report. So the key points are in the staff report, but again, 3 phases to the work. At each one, RVSD has very good check-in and review and approval authorities. They will pay a single one-time fee of $17,500 to cover our administrative and overhead costs to support the process.
As a hookup fee?
Yeah, and it's essentially the standard fee for a single-family home multiplied by the number of homes. District is the CEQA lead. We think it's a very minimal categorical exclusion. If it turns out otherwise, we have a way to address that. The HOA is responsible for the design, construction, inspection, and when we have had adequate verification of all of that, there'll be a formal acceptance phase. All of that's laid out in the details. I think we're looking at about a, roughly out to July of 2019 for this whole process to get completed. They need to do design, then go get bids, et cetera. So this is going to take a little time. But with the review of legal counsel and staff, the agreement that's presented for you this evening is recommended for approval. If it is approved, there would be a related action from the Larkspur Creekside HOA, and they have a date set for their membership to vote on the related actions and the special assessment to fund the the sewer system construction. So that's what's before you. Andrea obviously can address questions and hand it back to the board.
Let me start. Ann?
So the money we receive is through the HOA. It's not through each individual owner?
Well, the district
How are we
wants
getting the
that.
money? That's what I was-
Yeah, good question. So my understanding is that the only monies that RVSD is going to receive, and we're going to receive this one-time $17,500 permit fee, that will be a payment from the Larkspur Creekside HOA as an entity to the Ross Valley Sanitary District. We're not looking for each of the 70 homes to pitch in to us for that fee.
It's only one for
Uh,
70 homes?
It's a one-time charge of $17,500.
So each home's not going to be charged?
My understanding, Pam, is that through their HOA, their special assessments, they would collect that money.
But that's really their role.
Is that the equivalent of 70 times our hookups fee, or is it something?
It's not the hookup fee,
Because they're
Mary,
already
it's
hooked
the
up.
permit fee.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, so it's not hookup.
correct. And then to distinguish, if this were a brand new home,
$5,000.
they would pay both a connection fee and a permit fee for staff time. In this case, it's not a new connection, so we're not charging them a connection fee, we're only charging them the permit fee, which again covers our administrative and overhead time to process the request.
Okay.
So in essence, they're doing what we would do,
Yeah.
but they're paying for it, they're giving us a little bit of a fee. And it's an area that's probably letting in a lot of salt water, because I think they told me their manholes flood at high tide. And so this is a terrific project for us.
And this is the part that was built in the 80s, like it's in between Bon Air and Doherty, right?
Yeah.
And it includes some low-income housing on the north end. Some, it's like two-story apartments?
No.
No.
It's
Okay.
just
Those are
it's
seven
owners.
first.
70 single-family dwellings.
Okay, it doesn't include those.
This was an old dump site in the 70s.
Yeah.
And,
Just gotta see if
And
they're.
it's definitely Bayard.
yeah.
Now, I have a question. What about if they do their laterals? Are we gonna give them?
Well, but it said, if you read that, it said, we would incent them to do the laterals. I had a question about that myself, because
Yeah.
the incentive is nothing different than our normal incentive, you just bring it to their attention.
Right, so this was a focus of a fair amount of discussion. So the laterals, first of all, think of them, break them out into upper and lower. The
Yeah.
upper lateral from the
They have to
face
replace
of the
the lower.
building to the property, and the lower lateral from the property line to the public, or to the main. The lower laterals will all be replaced as part of the main construction, just like they would be on a typical capital project. And so there's no discretion about those. 100% of the lower laterals get done as part of the basic construction. The upper laterals, the way the agreement is structured, there is a strong incentive for each property owner to get their upper lateral replaced during this work. And the incentives include no new permitting fee, like in other words, you're covered by that 17.5. Access to the same level of financial assistance we'd be providing. So if they were to do that today, we would, we'd give them the 1,500 or whatever.
We don't give them the paving, isn't the paving $4,000?
Correct. Now, in that area, they're not subject to that at the moment, Tom, because those are private streets, so they don't quite qualify for that incentive. But they do qualify, so they qualify for the standard financial assistance. And that's the incentive, is that if you get it done now, no permit fee, you've got monies available from the district. If a property owner elects to not do anything with their upper lateral, up until the date that the district accepts the new infrastructure. After that date, they're just like any other property owner. They can apply, but there's no special treatment. So those are the incentives.
Let me ask you this, do you have a clue, because this was my question. It sounds like it was somewhat shoddy work when the place was built in 1980.
Yeah.
What is your best guess as to any of your staff's opinion or what they've passed on to you about the condition of their laterals, upper laterals?
Similar, they're not in great shape. They have all different construction materials. I would say similar. Yeah, it's a mixed bag. None of them. I think we decided, and John, sorry, I'm looking at you. Correct me if I say this incorrectly. Out of all the laterals that we inspected, we didn't inspect them all. But we did a pretty good sampling of them. I think we determined that basically none of them 100% met current.
Not one of them.
Not a single one met current RVSD standards. Yeah. So that's why we feel that we didn't. The HOA though was adamant that, and I think we're okay with this, that we didn't really have a mechanism to force every property owner to make that decision because it is a private property matter at that point. So just so we've pushed as much as we can.
Well, can we offer anything else? I mean, it's a significant area. It's subject to saltwater flooding. I mean, I'd rather see us suck up a little bit and there's going to be a lot of construction there. Get it all done at once, make them a better offer. Maybe we could double the 1,500.
Participation, right? Well, so let me look into this because the one is a little bit.
I don't think they'd mind that change in the contract.
Yeah, you've approved, the board has approved we've approved a higher.
We don't have any other 70 properties going at one time. So that's that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So we've approved a higher grant incentive for designated high I&I basins as part of the pilot program this fiscal year. And we just recently sent out about, I think about 800 letters to properties in the Larkspur area, because a big chunk of Larkspur is in the high I&I basis designation. So what I can do is check with staff, and if we feel that that's an appropriate area to apply that, we can offer the higher rate. So I don't know, so let me look into that, I guess would be the answer. At a minimum, they get the loans, the grants that everyone else can. And if we can verify that there's a basis for a targeted higher incentive for the reasons you noted, Doug, that's easily brought in. And when you're applying it to 70 homes, we have some leeway there. Meaning, you know, if it's and remember, it's capped at 50% of the actual cost. So if we were to offer them $4,000, for example, upper laterals only on those homes might not quite cost as much because they're pretty small lots and they're not like being up in Fairfax with a 900-foot lateral or something. So the 4,000, they might hit the 50% cap. That's still a pretty good incentive. You're going to get your lateral replaced for 50 cents on a dollar.
Yep.
So if that's the board's direction, that's an easy enough modification that we can consider. We would just need time to work out the details.
You can also see how, I mean,
Wait for the motion.
how well will be, how many people are going to replace their upper laterals possibly? I mean, or get a sense from the HOA whether they think everybody, you know, or anyway. What would be the appropriate incentive, or how many people are going to do it in the first place?
Why don't we give you some flexibility there?
Well, here's what can I make a motion?
Well, before you have a motion, are there any other questions?
Can I have a clarify? Go ahead, Andrea, and I want to.
I was gonna say, you don't need to change anything about this
Right.
agreement today.
That's right.
If you want to sweeten the pot later, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not gonna bother the HOA.
It's not.
To say, hey, by the way, out of the goodness of our hearts, we're offering you more, even if it's not reflected in the agreement. So
Couldn't agree
I'm
more.
just a point of, I guess, or that you can approve this and still leave that option open.
All right, Tom, go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to move that staff, I'd like to move that we approve the agreement for transfer of private sewer infrastructure from the Larkspur Creek side HOA to the RVSD under the legal agreement and all set. And I'd also like to see if staff could include the lateral grant under the high inflow saltwater portion of our, and we don't have to change the.
You know, maybe in the future, they won't show up for meetings and it'll go that much faster. You know, they don't show up, they get a bonus. It's like
Well,
win-win.
I would like to be notified that we want them to get the higher
That's
grant,
right.
and they may not get it.
We would certainly, yeah, based on this direction, I mean, we'll work with the HOA reps and get the word out. They're going to have their membership meeting, and I'm sure this would be a welcome piece of news. And I'm 99% certain we can do this consistently, meaning we can offer up to $4,000 or 50% of the cost under the designated high I basins. The reason I say that is that this neighborhood over here, the Riviera Circle, thank you. We've already determined that the Riviera Circle area is eligible for the higher grant amounts due to the high I&I, and so that's very similar. So with that direction, we'll get a communication together that communicates they're eligible for up to the $4,000 or 50%, same as the other eligible
Do I have a
properties.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No, the motion carries. Okay, item number 13, no staff report, you cowards. The consideration of appointing a North Bay Watershed Association representative. This was put on the agenda at my request because we have two committee district directors on the North Bay Watershed Association, and we're not permitted to. We don't get 2 votes. So let's pick this up. So first off, let me go over the following. We have the following directors. Kelly is on finance and the ad hoc on outreach, I think it is.
No, on the JPA.
JPA, thank you. So is on human resources, which may not meet as often, and ad hoc on outreach. Ornstein is on human resources, CMSA, and ad hoc on outreach. Tom Gaffney is on CMSA, Finance, and the ad hoc on compensation. Right now, Miggs is on LAFCO, and we're now left with North Bay Watershed. Let's talk about what happened in the past. So, Pam, how long have you been on this?
This is my second year, but I'm not 100% sure. Could be longer.
Okay. And there was a concern in the past that we weren't getting reports back.
All right, do you want me to explain that?
Sure.
I actually brought that up at a meeting. I said the minutes with the email, I didn't hear any complaints or concerns. So, and these were the official minutes. I don't have any problem reporting out. I just thought it'd be easier. Then Sophie got married, and so the minutes then went to a different form. So there might have been 1 or 2 months that the minutes may have not been brought forward. So that's my answer.
Well, I would say, I serve at the pleasure of the Senate Council on MIRA, and what I do is I take the minutes, but I write about them, so I make a little bit more. Tom, do you have any opinions on this?
Well, I know we can only have one vote.
Right.
This is pretty much.
I think he's been on North Bay since I've been on the board.
Could be. I mean, it's the only active meeting I'm on. LAFCO is pretty dead right now because the MSR is done. So pretty much who I am is, I got the Sierra Club endorsement, and my whole life pretty much is environmental-based health issues and the fisheries, etc. So I would really like to finish out this year. I don't have much else to do here when I look at it. I mean, for outside committees.
Mike?
I've been here for almost 4 years, and I agree that the minutes have been put into, sent out to us in an email. But until I was, on the board at CMSA over there, and then on North Bay Watershed, I had no idea, really. The important things that North Bay Watershed Association is doing, and its members, just had no idea. And I think it's really, really important, because I've been giving, reports over at CMSA for a while, and we decided to rotate over there and let somebody else do it. And I think it would be very beneficial for this organization to really hear about the details of what the North Bay Watershed is doing. I agree with you, Pam. It's, when you gave an impassioned plea that we supported their yearly or biannual meeting up there, I went and I was pretty much blown away by what they were doing. But I would have never had any idea had I not gone to that meeting, because the minutes just say Joe Smith from Marin something, met with us for 20 minutes. The minutes do not reflect what that organization does at all.
Minutes are not mental, so yeah, I agree with that.
So I just really would like to do that here.
Well, I have been really active there with Judy Kelly, and I was on the communication committee, and we put together with Brad and other members. We met, and so I don't know. I think some board members have a lot of committees and blah blah blah. And I sort of gave up the outreach because I really wanted to stay on this committee, and it was like I didn't want to do too much because my mother was in hospice. So that's sort of what I meant.
And your mother's passed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So, the minutes are not sufficient, I can say that. Again, getting back to where we had.
But if there's a complaint, please say it. I mean, don't come back and say, oh, you're not on the committee now because I didn't get enough information. It's kind of ridiculous.
Can we have an agreement that we'll leave Pam on for the next couple of meetings, and we'll then take this up again if we feel we need to?
You know, I don't want to, I understand that you're very passionate about this, Pam. And I just got to tell you that, you know, I'm going to say this in open because that's where we are. We had a meeting at Central Marin Sanitary Agency, and the Ross Valley Sanitary District was actually quite a large part of that meeting. And yeah, I was there, but I was there as CMSA. And you came for about 10 minutes and left. I asked you about it, and you said, oh, you've been on this tour before. It's exactly what you told Jason, and you left. And there were people wanting to ask questions. That day, you know, filling up.
You know, I want to do a point of order here. We're not even, this is like ridiculous. I mean, I've seen Michael leave, come early and leave and everything else. I think we need to just stay, this is kind of a point of order.
No,
I feel like we're just stacking up stuff.
No, we're not stacking. It's.
I mean, I'm not on CMSA, so I wasn't even on CMSA. I just came out and I couldn't stay.
Is that the meeting you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not even on CMSA.
Is that the meeting you're talking about?
I'm not sure.
No, it was
Yeah,
just,
there
it was
a meeting
this
that was
last
at-
year.
It was at the meeting at CMSA.
Was it in North Bay Watershed, or was it CMSA?
It was CMSA.
We were holding as a member of the CMSA, because I felt that we, which, and actually then includes us, because we're 50% of CMSA, we invited the North Bay Watershed Association to come, just as the North Bay Watershed Association was invited by Sonoma Water last week to come and hold their meeting there, to hold the meeting at Central Marin Sanitary Agency. It was not a CMSA meeting. It was a North Bay Watershed Association meeting. And Ross Valley Sanitary District was not represented there. And personally, I asked about it, and I you know, the reason was I've seen it before. And I didn't think that was good. And you know, for whatever reason, what happens there at North Bay Watershed, and we pay a lot of money to be there, is not represented to this board. And I really, the same way you feel passionate about being there, and you were on all those things, but we didn't know it. You know, those may have been
All right,
important.
so hold on.
I don't know what
You've spoken and you've spoken. Let's.
Well, all I can say is that if you want to get down to people, I can go on about Michael's at
No,
conferences
listen, no,
and
we're not,
he comes late and leaves early. If you want to get into all this nitpicky stuff, what really bothers me is this divides this board. There's kind of, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. If you've got an issue with the person, go to the horse's mouth, talk to them. You know, I feel like I'm being almost watched and hassled. This has got to stop. If you want this board to continue on the path it's been on, what, the last year, then these kind of dynamics have got to stop. If you've got an issue with somebody, bring it to the board or talk to them privately. But I really feel like this is totally inappropriate, totally inappropriate. And I'm sure some members on this board have had issues where they can't make a meeting or they have to leave early, whatever reason. But I'm just coming from that place of, if you got a problem, bring it forward. And I really feel bad that the dynamics have to make this board feeling split again. I mean, if you want written reports, just say so. Or if you want verbal reports, just say so. But it doesn't mean just because you haven't done something according to someone else's standards, it's really not board directed on reporting out, really, and there's no policy. Then, you know, you don't like well, you can't be on that committee now. You can't be on that committee now. So if that's how you want to treat your board members, go ahead, Michael. But it just creates a lot of havoc.
Okay, that's enough. We're done with that. Mary?
I don't have a strong feeling.
Tom? Okay, so I'm going to ask that we leave Pam on this board for this time, and we'll retake this up in a couple of months, and unless I have a different motion for that. Okay, so we're moving on. Verbal reports from board members and staff, and requests for future agenda items. Tom?
I have none, but I would agree with the suggestion that we try to assist the Sonoma and Napa agencies, especially, I don't think it's with the sewers as much as the storm drains, because I think a lot of debris, and we're good at cleaning out pipes.
Yep.
So maybe, I think we have a mutual assistance agreement in Marin. And, so I think we should be able to extend it to some.
And also in the spirit of good portion of our staff members living,
Yes.
right, at least north of 37, as you said in that first email. I just say if you come across any opportunities for our staff or equipment to help in a way that does not dramatically hinder our own performance,
Yeah,
go for it. Not that we know about that yet, I would guess.
so we're awaiting
All right,
more
I got you,
information, but go ahead.
Andrea, do you want to go back?
I don't want to go back, but I'm going to go back.
Okay,
one
so can I have a
item
motion
because
to
we
appoint,
still have two appointees.
Can I have a motion to appoint Pam Meigs to the North Bay Watershed Association representative?
I so move at your
Thank you.
selection,
Tom?
President Kelly.
Please, can I have a second?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
I will abstain from that.
Thank you.
I will not vote.
Okay, so
But wait, but we only have one voter.
that's right, and we only have one person, it's Pam.
What?
Did we vote Michael off?
Pam,
Yeah,
We only have one slot.
There's
They were
8
both
months
on.
left.
no, we said 2 months here, so we'll readdress
We'll
this.
readdress it. All right. Do
Before
you
we
have
go
any?
before we go on, there's 2 more verbal reports, I think.
What?
Should probably happen. We should have reports from CSDA. We spent a ton of money to send us down there.
Yeah, I have some reports.
And I think we should
Michael
also
complained.
report from North Bay Watershed.
You want me to start?
No.
Okay.
Mary, do you have anything to report out?
not from any conferences and such, but I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Michael, do you have anything to report out?
Yeah, I was fortunate to go to the CSDA meeting. If you'll just give me a second here. Dig up the appropriate papers here. CSDA is Small Districts meeting, California Small Districts Association meeting. And it's really, I went a few years ago, and it's an amazing amount of information that comes back on a very diverse section. None of it has to do with pipes in the ground, really. Hang on a second, I'm sorry. For instance, there was a lot of it having to, one of the meetings I went to was SB 96 and its impact on public works projects. And so I brought some information back from us for that. But
What is SB 96?
SB 96 is,
Briefly.
yeah, basically it's raises threshold for contractor registration, raises threshold for filing the Public Works Contract 100, and imposes penalties on contractors and subcontractors who do not register. So it's important, and I'm sure that we do it, that we check and make sure that everybody that we work with has their appropriate paperwork filed, because otherwise we could be in big trouble for non-compliance. And so there's a big presentation about that. CalPERS update and how to prepare for and survive a CalPERS audit. Basically, know that it's coming in advance. Get as much as you can done up front and then when they come and audit, you'll be more prepared. And again, I brought back the
CMSA got a CalPERS, not an audit, but like a directive, and disallowed some of the payments that they were making to staff, and then the, you know, it gets involved in the union, so we had to solve it.
Do you feel like we're having an audit coming anytime soon?
And we wanted to avoid a CalPERS audit because they really,
So we actually had a CalPERS audit in mid to late 2013. It was a fairly lengthy process, but it did result in a lot of follow-up work that, I mean, in terms of resolving a lot of questions with their staff. But this district has had I guess what you could call a recent CalPERS audit, if you consider mid to late 2013 to be recent. So as far as I know, and Julie Blue was the lead really staff person on that response and working with the CalPERS staff. So I think it did assist us because it did raise a number of technical issues that we had to correct with CalPERS related to, example, how premium pay is handled and so forth, different incentive pay. So it was a very, they do a pretty good job. It did help clear up a lot of issues in terms of our reporting and what we're paying in, for certain specific compensation items to CalPERS. And that was, that was the CalPERS audit.
well, that's good, we already had it.
I went and heard a talk by Brent Ives, who we all know here. Is that maybe Doug?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that Earl Ives' brother?
Yeah.
I thought that exact thing
He
when I was
he was the mayor of Tracy
Okay.
for many, many, many years over there. And now he goes around the state, and maybe even the country, giving talks on boards and how they should all behave and act.
Oh, is he the guy who sells the books?
Yes.
I have that book. So I did meet him. I met him at a different.
Yeah,
I think I met him last year.
CASA, he was at
He's
CASA.
active, he's very active at CASA and
There's
SCSDA.
always a chance.
Anyway, he gave a talk about policies and making sure they're up to date and reviewing them all of the time. So if anybody is interested in that, but the importance of doing that, for the first time in many, many years we really have our policies up to date, and we do review them. And it'd probably be a good idea if maybe once or twice a year, or maybe we should even talk about sometime in the future having a committee that, a few times a year works with staff and looks at the policies and say, are they up to date? Are they reasonable now? What can we change? And then if some things need to be changed, bring it up to the board. So
That is our policy, isn't it? To review
Yeah,
once
but-
a year?
I don't know that we have a review.
Not what?
Review the board policies?
To review any policies.
I thought,
No, we'd be reviewing policies all the time. We just created a bunch of them.
Yeah.
They're gonna be fine.
that's somewhere.
Put them on autopilot. Wait till something goes wrong.
No, but I'm not saying that the whole board needs to do that, but Brett made that you really need to make sure that it's up to date.
Can you always say Brett Ives?
Brett Ives.
Please.
Brent,
Oh,
Brett
there's a
Ives.
distinction.
Brent Ives.
Thank you.
He has an N.
Gender identity in the workplace doesn't really affect us other than on our applications for employment. We cannot put gender on it anymore. You can't ask, you can't think. It's pretty amazing what you have to go through. And I was even thinking I was going to bring up, okay, we have to have a locking toilet downstairs. But I realized we have two locking toilets upstairs. And so I think we're in compliance, and out at the Larkspur Landing property right now, that's a locking toilet, so that handles all the gender.
Can I remind you, this came up recently with an installation of a restaurant in San Anselmo, where he had unisex bathroom signs, and the planning director, I would be careful, I'm not sure who did, made him remove them and put on a men's and a woman's, which I immediately pointed out is completely in violation of the law, which took effect of March 1st, 2017, which says if it's a single facility, it must have a unisex.
Yes.
Happily, the town manager, who was very nice, said he would pay for the new signs because they're $80 a sign, and So anyway, any bathrooms that are in Larkspur that are single facility must say unisex, must be unisex size.
If they have 2 bathrooms?
If there's 2 toilets inside the bathroom, it can be a men's and a woman's. If the room only has 1 facility inside,
Like the ones upstairs, yeah.
Yeah.
they must have unisex.
Like your one at home.
Yep.
I think those will never.
That's true, and they changed them.
They changed it last year when the law changed.
My
I didn't notice.
But anyway, it's a very difficult issue, and it's going to come up a lot. Watch out, dangerous condition of public property. Boy, that's an interesting one. What are we liable for if we're working somewhere and there's a 1/4 inch lip? Now, my understanding is, and I thought I heard him say it, that if we have a construction management group that's handling our projects, they're responsible for the safety of the project. And they have insurance that if they screw up, in theory, they're going to protect us, but we'll get sued anyway. Anyway, it was very interesting, and I'm going to hand all this over.
How long was that, the 3 days was it?
It was really Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning early.
Okay.
Just a couple more things. And again, I'll hand this over to Mary, but and I sent it already to Andrea, but this has got some nice documents in it having to do with the Public Records Act and Brown Act that I thought was pretty good. And that's what this is also.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, so I attended as well. I did a written report. Is the camera seeing? If you could take one and pass it down. It was the most uplifting, out of all of them I've been to, it was the most uplifting and positive. I think I've never seen so many people at one of these conferences before. The guest keynote speaker is Manly Feinberg. I bought his book. It's about leadership. It was awesome. They also had Eric Bowles there, a ex-football player, who talked also about leadership and setting, how you set goals. Found out some interesting, amazing stuff, things that have been kind of rattling my brain a bit. They had this one, here's the, if you want to look and see what kind of, they're called breakouts or workshops. But they had this one called Jeopardy, and it was a lot of fun. So they had these categories of all these different special district information. But one was about public surplus land. And there's an attorney there from the state. I talked to him. So I'm going to ask at the end for an item to be, if possible, because the law has some issues around what you do with surplus land, and you just don't throw it out for bid, and you have to get affordable, I think housing or open space first.
Well, no, you have to offer it to other public agencies for those purposes, and then after they reject it, then you can open it up.
Yeah, so that was really fascinating. I thought that would be something we should probably look at.
Yeah,
he said,
Greg and I have talked about it at length for another one.
Oh, okay, great. Also, just on the marijuana law, which I found out this also breakout. So you're going to have to follow the federal government still, just because the state has legalized pot. We're all under the federal laws. I imagine. I don't know if you knew that, but most people not well. No.
Well, it also are, as far as operations staff, depending on your commercial license and other applicable qualifications, those are not changed by the California law change. So.
Okay. And then the other thing I attended was, it's called the dangerous condition of your land. So there's all these things about people going on the land and tripping and falling and suing, and is our land insured? And I know the fence is funky, and so that was a great insight. And I have a website if you want to look at that to help out with that. Then I attended the California Adaptation Planning Guide, which is a whole big thing coming out through the state. Because what's going to happen is all the infrastructure, resources, services, everything is going to be affected by climate change. And they're just now finishing up a policy. I don't think it's totally done, but I also have the website for that, and I would think it might change how we do business. And I'm not really sure that's a huge thing to take on. Let's see what else. Okay. And then I attended this thing about our public perception, and like they said, 70% of people do not even know what a special district is when you ask them. I mean, I put it on this handout just to remind us who we are and what is our purpose. I thought that was interesting, and then they put all these ways how to focus on our image, all these things about outreach, and then also about if you're going to raise rates, on all this great information on how as a board and individuals when we're approached, how to be, how to not be. And then here's a packet on the last day on Friday. They met actually on Friday for 2 to 3 hours. Here's all this legislation overview and the things they oppose or the things they support. So I sat in on that, and that was pretty interesting. And then the swag. And this was the year of the swag, I think. You name it. They got sunglasses. You look at these little travel kits, all kinds of stuff. These are ear things.
Did you bring one for each of them?
Water bottles. I mean, I've never seen so much. Here is a photo lens. I guess it sticks on your
phone.
Yeah, it's like, and it was mostly though attorneys this year, more than any attorneys I've ever seen. It was like really fascinating.
Yeah, Myers-Nave, Weaver Cassidy,
It's unbelievable.
Nave, right.
And,
See, when we were interviewing, we didn't know that.
Downey?
No, Downey Brand was not there.
No,
No, they weren't.
I've actually been wanting to go, but I've strengthened. But we don't really have a public law practice. That's why, right? I mean, we specifically like that's what's in your Myers not it. We're public lawyers, but we don't.
So, and there's also this really cool website, which is called districtsmakeadifference.org. It's all about special interests. They've got kids stuff and whatever. So there's all this information. So that was I also have some handouts if you want to look at it. I think I said enough.
Thank you. Okay, my report out three things. We got a request from Jane Coe Bauer of the Marin County Civil Grand Jury. The email says the current Marin Civil Grand Jury is requesting of Ross Valley Sanitary District a scanned copy of its formation agreement and agenda. Please forward by October 20th, which is 2 days from now. So this is from 1899. You're looking for.
So we've Mary Brown has helped put together a response to that, and we have found what we think are some responsive documents that we'll be sending. They include we actually have a County of Marin. Back then, the way it worked was you actually had a vote and you submitted to the county, to the local county to, I guess, approve the process. So we don't have like something that is labeled, the founding of the Ross Valley Sanitary District, but it appears to be the functional documents that would support, the vote, the budget, the first rates that were set, the very first meeting notes, the very first ordinance. So we're going to put all that, 1899. We're going to put, and some of the documents are more like 1906, 1908. We're going to scan those. There's basically 4 documents we think are responsive, and we're going to send those and see if that meets their needs, and then we'll kind of go from there. Because it was kind of an open-ended, we weren't sure exactly what they were.
I think they would want the formation in the sanitary district in 1923.
So there's not, yeah, so we look for something like a reso or something that tied to the 1923 Sanitary Act, and we weren't able to locate that. So I think our foundation is basically the activity in the 1899 through 1906 window, because it actually took several years, right, of process to get all the things in place as far as we can tell. So we'll be sending those, Doug, to the grand jury person, and hopefully they'll help out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and as Mary pointed out, it was quite interesting to see, even back in 1906, people were complaining about the rates. So,
And they were what, $1.50 a year?
so, yeah, it's in the-
I bet they would have something.
The other issue.
I do,
Go ahead.
are we moving on?
No.
Oh, this is the last one. I have 2 more things to report out, but go ahead.
Why don't you go ahead and do this?
Okay, so I went to the LAFCO meeting. It's very, pretty what I call dry right now. The only thing they're doing is doing some annexation of some property out in Bolinas to add. And they're talking about hiring a new executive officer, and Rachel's going to be it, but it's pretty minimal stuff. I mean, unless there's something really that looks like it's MSR related to us, I don't see going to the meetings really.
You have something else to
I was
say?
looking at
Yeah,
this,
I do.
and our special districts represented on LAFCO, and not all the counties are. I was very surprised.
What about LAFCO? Yeah, you mean
They don't have special districts.
oh, that was the big talk the last day on Friday about LAFCO, that yes, it's true. And so there's a big outreach right now. LAFCO is becoming more powerful. And I think there's going to be some funding to help people start consolidation efforts for their districts. So LAFCO's getting.
And are you saying Rachel's going to be the permanent
No.
executive director? Okay.
No.
She's the acting.
I understood.
Okay, so I went to the Russian River tour, the fish ladder. It was the best thing since the field trips I remember from high school. So it's amazing. It took them $12 million to upgrade it and rebuild it, but it's just incredible. And they have a classroom. And this is actually where the water comes in from the river, and they go into these huge wells with these massive generators and all this stuff. It was just incredible. I never seen anything like it. And they've been awarded for some of the cleanest water in the state. But they have this big classroom, and it's all levels from very young all the way through. And I was so impressed. And they have one on wastewater. They take the kids and do a whole series of teaching with wastewater. And while we were there, the kids came out too in their bus. It was very cute. So, the Russian River serves 600,000 people, and they get most of their water through the Sonoma Lake. And so here is a little handout on their management project and water conservation and all that. But they're doing really well with their water. And Marin County gets about, I think she told me 20%. And most of that's used probably up near Nevada. I don't think it's used so much down here. And that's it.
Thank you. I also noted to Greg Norby an email I got from somebody we've spoken to, I have, some time back. So he notes that Governor Brown signed SB 229 into law on October 8th, and that is the new law regarding junior secondary units and accessory units. And so if that's now in law, we talked about bringing this issue back up in front of the board once that was signed. So I asked that we put that on a future agenda item. It doesn't have to be next month, but at some point in the future, I'd like to put that.
We're anticipating at the moment that it directly affects, at a minimum, the connection fee ordinance for the district, and it is something we probably also want to separately consider in terms of our rates. So staff's general work plan at the moment, we're anticipating bringing you an item to consider modifying the connection fee ordinance to address the new law roughly in the January-February timeline. And then our recommendation is we would first address it from a connection fee perspective and get clarity there because the state law helps with that. And then what the state law doesn't address is how, if at all, because we bill by EDU for rates, and there are some questions related to how the ADU count that's assigned to the property affects that. And we have at least one customer in touch with us on that topic already who has what she would describe as an accessory dwelling unit. The county has her tagged for 2 EDUs, and Ross Valley Sanitary District is billing that property for 2 EDUs. So both of those will come your way early in the new calendar year.
Okay.
And having the state law passed, as we talked about before, kind of eliminates any ambiguity about that. So we can address it. And last thing on that, there was conversations on that at CASA, and there's some good templates that we can follow where other agencies have put together some, what we think are some pretty defendable approaches to the connection fee aspect of the ADU. So we've got some good examples to draw from.
Okay. Lastly, I'd like to ask for an agenda item to be put on to talk about moving these meetings to Current Boulevard.
Oh, I got one too when you're done.
Go ahead. Future agenda items, anybody?
I would like to talk about, I mean, I just looked at the CMSA Board Finance Committee, and they're starting to talk about JPA member agency rate adjustments and another 10-year financial forecast. And I'm feeling very concerned that we aren't meeting before they meet.
We don't what?
We don't meet before them. So our board doesn't collectively talk about some of these issues, like some input. I mean, maybe I'm
What are you asking in short?
worrying too much, but I would think if we had some issues we want to talk about, what do you think? I mean,
Well, I think this topic's come up before, and I think that was part of the reason. I think let me make sure I understand. The general topic is when there's consideration at the CMSA board of a significant topic that might benefit from discussion and direction at the RVSD level, so that the RVSD appointees can convey that position at the CMSA board. How do we do that effectively? Do we get the opportunity to do that? And we took a cut at trying to improve our ability to do that, and I think we've made big strides with the practice of the Ross Valley Sanitary District appointees to CMSA always meeting ahead of time with the general manager and so forth. And so my 2 cents is the CMSA appointees for now, we're looking ahead to those things as best we can and be ready to bring them back.
But a structural way to deal with it would be I think as she's suggesting, is for us to meet the week before they meet. I mean, it would be a dramatic change in every schedule, and but.
We have meetings scheduled. Okay, first of all, there's 3 people on the finance committee, and 2 of them are from our district.
Right.
you're on it?
But I think we should really, I kind of agree with Pam on this. We should update the board a lot of what's happening there, because it's really impacts.
Oh, but they don't, Mary, you weighed in on this. They don't come out with their agenda until the Friday before the Tuesday. So it's impossible for us to meet.
You wouldn't know their items.
Yeah, okay.
So they meet, and then we should, they meet Tuesday, and the plan was for the finance committee to meet just before the CMSA board. We just decided that today. And we had our first meeting. But that gives us a good chance to debrief the board.
I do, when I realize that I have the CMSA board packet in my mailbox, I open it up and look at it, and at least one occasion, when I was president anyway, I called Michael to tell him what I thought about something on their agenda item. So I think we could all be a little like heads up about it, but I think you're absolutely right. And I think we are doing that better because, Tom, even though you're not a CMSA appointee right now, you're on the finance committee.
No, I'm
Yes.
Oh, you
We're
are.
both on CMSA.
Tom and I are on CMSA,
Oh, okay.
and
Oh, you're on the ad hoc JPA. Got it.
Yep.
Yeah. I knew we had somebody
Yep.
who was.
And on top of that, okay, we're on the finance committee, which is a brand new thing for this new session. But in addition to that, for how long now, a year? Tom and I have been meeting with Jason outside of the board meeting and a private thing where we bring up everything that, would be of interest here, and what's of interest there.
I want to So,
We
we
have
talked about
to-
this in the past, I don't think it's gonna work
Well,
right
we
now.
have to move our meetings to Monday.
But right now, I think this is, so duly noted.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Okay, I hereby adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Supposed to ask.
Thank you.